Hello everybody, my name is John Scribante with Real Property Management. Today I'm going to cover 6 questions that you should consider before turning your existing home into a rental property. Many times people will find themselves with a situation where they're relocating out of town, they're moving, maybe they're coming back in a few years, maybe not, and they're going to consider renting their home. And this is a decision that they should think a lot about because there's a lot of issues that can make it go right and a lot of things that can make it go wrong. So taking time to review this is very important. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is, if I didn't own this home, would I buy it as a rental property? Now, that may seem like a question that you really can't deal with because if you already own it, you might not have the resources to buy another property, but since you already own it, this is my rental property that I'm going to use. But if you didn't already own it, is this the one that's going to make the best rental? So take into consideration, what is the floor plan? You know, when renters look at a house, their number one question is, will my queen bed fit up the stairs? And can I make sense of what this room is off to the side? You know, if you have a bedroom that opens up into a living room or into a kitchen or something of that nature, you know, these are floor plans that a lot of residents would just rather not deal with because it creates awkward living arrangements, and in some cases in older houses, if they can't get their furniture upstairs or in the other room, this can cause a lot of renters to not want the property. And your A+ renters have a lot of options, so they're going to go find a property that better suits their needs. And so you don't want to settle for a B or C quality resident just because your floor plan or the condition of your property. So floor plan is one, condition is certainly the other. Curb appeal, the neighborhood, what's going on across the street. If you have neighbors with a lot of junk, you know, in their front yard, or there nuisances somewhere, you know, the residents that you want, your A+ residents, are going to want to look for a property that has a lot of curb appeal, good floor plan, great condition, doesn't have unusual odors in the property, doesn't have too large of a yard. Sometimes when you buy a property, it's like, oh great, it's got a large backyard. Well, renters don't want a large backyard because they have to mow it, and they're only there for a few months, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, and taking care of your property is not why they're renting. So that's something to consider, is does the property itself have all of the attributes that you want in a rental? How much will my net profit be per month? So notice I did not say cash flow. Cash flow is an important part of owning rental real estate, but it's not everything. And you'll see later in this presentation, there are 4 primary sources of wealth creation in real estate. Cash flow is one of those. But I will tell you, over the course of 7 to 10 years, you know, real estate is a long-term investment. Your first year is not going to be a stellar year. You're going to have extra costs for painting and upgrades and cleaning and things to attract that A+ resident. And your cash flow is going to suffer because you're going to be sitting on a vacancy for a month or two while you're looking to fill it. And you're also going to be taking rent that is certainly going to increase over time, but it's not going to be your best rent in the first year. So just be prepared for year 1 being a survival year, a year that if you can survive through it, next year will be awesome because your rents will go up, presumably 3 to 5%. Your interest expenses going down because you're paying interest on the smaller balance on your debt. And so although property taxes and other things may increase, usually with continued increased rents, that makes up for it. But the more important thing is, in calculating your profit in a month, is the appreciation. So even if you cash flowed 0 in a year and had $30,000 of appreciation on your property, that's quite a bit, you know, $2,500 a month in growth, in wealth creation. So factor in not only your cash flow, but also your appreciation and tax benefits. So we talked about your gross income, less your mortgage, taxes, insurance. Always budget for repairs. Now, over a 10-year period of time, the average maintenance expense is 12%. And that may seem high, 12% of your gross. That's more than a month's rent. That takes into consideration large expenses as well. Roofs, siding, furnaces. So in any given year, you're not going to spend 12%. But you're going to have years where you're going to have to replace a water heater, $1,800, or repair some appliances or even replace the appliances. So make sure that you budget for repairs and don't think that just because it's a rental property that the tenant's going to pay for everything, you're not going to have expenses. If you think that you're going to spend anything less than 12% on average over time, that's just not the case in the investment real estate world. HOA expenses, management services, that calculates your net income. That generally is a taxable item until you take into consideration your appreciation, which we'll get to in a few minutes. The third question is one that some people struggle with, and that is, can I emotionally detach from this property? There's a real emotion when you've lived in a house for 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 years. You know, your children grew up in this house, people got married, you had good times, bad times, and now somebody else is going to move into the property. That can be an emotional issue that you have to come to grips with. Not to mention that people that move into your house may not take as good a care of your property as you would have. Now, some do, and some take better care than you did, but others will not take as good a care. And that's not a bad thing. It's the reality. It's not the best thing, but you have to be prepared for walking back into a property and having nicks in the walls and scratches and, some things not cleaned. Not everybody lives like you do. And you have to realize this is no longer your home. It's really not even an investment, although it is in a lot of regards. It's a business. And when you think of a business, you run a business based on maximizing your gross income, keeping your expenses in check, and providing a product that people want. And that's it. Those are really the three things in the real estate business. And in this case, your customers, your residents, some are going to be better than others. You're going to have some that are paying rent on time, some that are going to be slow, some that take care of it, some that don't mow the lawn, don't pick the weeds. That's all part of rentals. Part of our job as a manager is to make sure those things are happening. But you have to be able to detach effectively because it is now your business. It's no longer your home. Number 4 is, what are your long-term plans? This is an important question because you need to be able to ask yourself, if I'm never coming back, maybe the best thing to do is to sell this property and buy a proper rental property, or maybe 2. Maybe you have a large house that can be rented, that tends to have higher turnover on the larger luxury homes. But if you have a large house, maybe you sell it and buy 2 smaller properties, give you some diversification, maybe one side of town, another side of town, maybe a duplex, maybe a single family. Give yourself a greater yield, so income versus property value. Large houses generally have much lower yield, so finding that house that's right in the middle of your average valuations in your area is a good place to be. If you're moving back in a few years, then sure, converting it to rental may be work, even if it's not a perfect floor plan or a perfect neighborhood. It's a problem solver. You're trying to solve a problem for a year or 2. Move back in, you're back where you wanted to be. But if you're never returning, maybe the best thing to do is to sell it. Now, in today's world, a lot of people have 2 and 3% mortgages. In that case, even with a bad floor plan, you can compromise a little bit on the rent, still make good cash flow, still have a good investment. Number 5, what are the tax breaks? Well, there are 3 primary ones. There are some others depending on your situation, but primary is depreciation. That's a non-cash expense, meaning that it's an expense that you can use to reduce your taxable income, but it doesn't take any cash to actually apply that. Depreciation is about 3.5% of the value of the property every year. It's 27.5 years. So you take the property, divide by 27.5 years, and I think that's 3.64%. That percentage is an expense that you can take to reduce your taxable income. A 1031 exchange is a method of selling that investment property down the road and deferring income taxes. And then, of course, the estate tax, current law allows you to step up the basis. So if you paid $300,000 and then you took that property, to your grave, so to speak, your heirs would be able to step up the basis. So instead of 300,000, that property might be worth $1 million. And so from a capital gains point of view, they start off at $1 million. So that allows you to avoid all the capital gains on the delta between your purchase price and your new basis that your estate inherits. Number 6, what are the other benefits of owning rental property? Well, so we talked about cash flow. Cash flow can be break even and still make a good investment, because as long as you're factoring in reserves in your cash flow, you will have sufficient cash to not only pay all your bills, but also reserve for expenses that are coming down in the future. But cash flow is not it's certainly not the largest benefit. If you took all 4 of these benefits over a 10-year period of time, cash flow would be the smallest of the financial benefits in most cases. And appreciation is going to be your largest benefit. So owning real estate, you make money primarily in the appreciation. Cash flow is necessary to cover bills, build up reserves, and make improvements, but certainly not what you should be looking at when you're looking at your real estate. You should be looking at how well is this property going to appreciate. Principal pay down is an important piece because your debt is paid down, which reduces your interest expense on an annual basis, allows you to refinance later. Depreciation, we spoke to. So all 4 of those is what's going to create wealth in your real estate business. However, cash flow over time is going to be the smallest contributor of those 4, and appreciation will be the greatest contributor of those 4. So as you look forward into your future, answered these 6 questions, you will have the resources to cover college educations, pay for weddings or other life events, have retirement funds, or even roll this into another property and continue to build your real estate business. So I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, please let us know. This has been one in a series of educational workshops that we do on a regular basis. Thank you.